Reverend, thank you so much for your time and our sincere condolences. I wonder if you could talk to us about the first time you met Jackson Mthembu and your impressions of the man.
Well, I must start by saying I was really devastated to learn about his passing away today. I didn't expect it, and I wasn't even aware he was not well. I said to my dear wife when we met this afternoon that I feel like I've lost my own brother, because Jackson Mthembu was an activist during the United Democratic Front days, of which I was part of the leadership. He was a key activist from Mpumalanga. You could rely on Jackson Mthembu on anything that we were doing. I mean, he was so committed to the struggle. He was ready to sacrifice his life. He ended up being arrested and detained, and he suffered all the experiences that many activists suffered during that time. And he also got charged. And after being acquitted, it must have been around that time when the Council of Churches then took him on as part of its communication team. So I've known him as a communicator, as a dedicated comrade, as a dedicated servant who served the people. And I must say that, I mean, with the pandemic being what it is, everybody knows he died whilst he was on his boots. He went out of the way. He was like a frontline worker to make sure that the people of South Africa survived this pandemic. And we regret that his work would have exposed him to this pandemic, and we can only commit his soul to the Lord.
Reverend, it's just such a very sad day. And you know, looking back at his life, as you mentioned, he had severe ill treatment. He was tortured. He was detained. He was held in solitary confinement. And then in his later years, he had some real tragedies personally. You know, his death of his daughter in recent years springs to mind. But despite that, he always had that sort of delightful gap-toothed smile that he gave so readily, that we know and remember him for. I wonder if you could talk to us about his character and his ability to overcome hardship.
Well, you know, I mean, if you resisted apartheid during those days, remember he was on the young side. I mean, there's almost like 8 years difference between me and him. And he was ready to take the risk. Nobody could break his spirit. Not detention, not torture could do that to him. And even when he experienced these tragedies within his family, it was not only one tragedy, but he was able to hold his head up. And he kept on saying, like Mandela used to say, I had no time to be able to bring up my children, take care of them because of the struggle. All of us who come from that generation, I have one son who never had me as his father because we're underground, we're in detention, we're in prison. But, you know, Jackson Mthembu was able to withstand all that and continued to serve the people up to the last day. And that's why I respect him for it. And he is a person who stood for the truth, you know, even during the most difficult times. I mean, when he was the chief whip in Parliament, he was chief whip at a very difficult time in this country. And he took the risk and took a position where things were going wrong. You'll remember that, I mean, there were people who were trying to get Parliament to even violate its own laws and violate its decorum. And he was able to stand up and say, no, it can't happen, even if this is happening within my party. And that's why I respect him, because he stood for the truth.
An extraordinary man, and I'm sure you have so many wonderful memories of Jackson Mthembu, but if I had to ask you to share with us one treasured memory that will stay with you always, does something spring to mind?
No, I mean the real moment for me was during the time when he had to, to be in exile in Johannesburg from home because of the harassment of the police and the torture, the detentions. He came to Johannesburg almost like a refugee. And I met him during those days when he lived in Johannesburg. And he was simple but very committed. And he was not wavering in his commitment. And remember that for the South African Council of Churches, most of the staff during those days were either activists who came from Robben Island, who were coming from prison, who were detained. And that's the type of person the Council of Churches was looking for, because we're ministering to people in a conflict situation, like in a war zone. And you could put Jackson Mthembu there, and you could rely entirely on him, on what he was doing.
Thank you so much for sharing your memories of Jackson Mthembu at a very difficult time, and we wish you comfort at this time of mourning, and our condolences to you. Thank you very much for your time.